Hello and welcome everyone to our final virtual meetup for 2024. Believe it or not, it's already over or will be over in a couple of weeks, and we're already talking about 2025. Um, we've done a lot of great things in the Agile Boston community over the last year. And I wanted to take this hour in our last virtual meeting to really just talk about what we learned. So I want to invite one of my leadership colleagues to start off and talk about the year and talk about give thanks. And I think you should start.
Okay. So I wanted to share. There are so many things that are awesome about the year, but as I was kind of looking back and reflecting, I saw a common kind of thread around us, whether we're coaches, whether we're scrum masters, whatever part of the community we in or whatever role we're in, needing to either show our value and or part of that is communicating the value that we're adding to the organization and finding ways to say that and be I want to say be like living for us to live out loud. So those are some of the themes and what I heard. I think this idea was started by Jeff a number, and Joe, I'm going to look at you for how many years ago it was at Give Thanks, where he said, if we're not careful, and start to improve the way we communicate and how we do this, then we're all gonna be out of a job. And that kept kind of going through that kept coming up for me. And then this year, I feel like we're experiencing that now in certain ways, and we're finding ways to say, hey, we need to do better. We need to find ways to do better.
It,
So some
it was
of
it was in 2019, give thanks, and I brought it up to Jeff this past couple of weeks ago, and he said he didn't remember saying it, but if I said it, he said it, then he said it.
But so some of the events that I remembered, and Joe, you did some things. I'm going to let you speak to those there. I want to start by saying I'm not pulling up or bubbling up all of the events that aligned with this, but a few of them, because there were so many. I don't think you want to hear like all the list of them, then we can't talk about them. But the evidence-based management talk that Ryan Ripley and Todd Miller and Patricia Kong and the three of them are just so awesome. That in-person event and their talk about being transparent and what showing the evidence and that what they outlined in their book are ways that we can improve the communication around this. I remember Martin
Hinshelwood.
Hinkle
Hinshelwood, Martin Hinshelwood from Naked Agility.
I'm struggled to pronounce his last name correctly. He was also talking about ways to be valuable, to provide our value, and then just last month now, 2 months ago, the event we had right before Give Thanks was Bob Galen, who was talking about sharing ways that we can communicate our value to the organization better, more. But also linked to that is this growth mindset. I mean, I think we all, many of us, that's part of what we do. We attract other people who want to learn more, and that's part of Agile Boston. And those of us who do come to these events kind of have that mindset. But I want to remind everyone the value of that, or the importance of that kind of growth mindset, constantly improving, finding new ways to communicate our value, finding new ways to be valuable for the teams, for leadership, for the organization, so that we're all doing better. And I'd like to hear from those of you who maybe were at some of those talks, or what things is this resonating with you? Have you experienced that? What I'd like to hear from others around some of these ideas.
Yeah, I'm seeing a good amount of chat, so please bring it up here. Anyone would like to add to what Ann was talking about?
Yeah, the future of work actually with this automation, not even automatization. I got two teams right now in Austin, Texas, that they have fired their product owner because they were not the business owner for say, or so in a large scale organization when you have PO from the technological application type of set and the business side, and then you have two POs, one backlog, and it's whatever. So the engineer, especially engineer, not just software developer, they say like, we don't need POs anymore because we have created a GPT, and that GPT, their own GPT, to actually tap in the Atlassian, Jira, and Confluence and make all the orderly management of the backlog. So they fired their PO. So we talk a lot of Scrum Master and Agile Coach, and here in Montreal, the Montreal market, there's no to answer. I think it's John was asking. I don't know where you're from, John, but here Agile Coach has been replaced by Change Manager, or what they call OMC, like Organization Change Management, blah, blah, blah. So they said like, oh, we don't need agility anymore because we have those guys. And even the PM are struggling right now. They have been replaced by Product Manager here in Montreal. And the Scrum Master is becoming like those PCO from PMI. Really, really sad to see the Scrum Master being downgraded into a delivery guy or delivery woman into a safe value stream or what have you. So that's the situation. So we have to bring value, and that's why I'm trying to do something more responsible according to value creation, and to make ourselves indispensable for the process-driven and continuous learning, as you mentioned at the beginning of your talk. So that was my 5 cents right now. I'd like to share with this group.
No, it's fantastic. Anyone else like to share something there? John?
No, that answered my question.
But I will be curious in your case because you mentioned like Scrum Master. There's no more now. Right now, what we see on the job posting here, it's only Scrum Master, but kind of a junior level. Even if I don't believe in junior and senior, it's like they just want someone. Could you deliver? Don't train us. Don't facilitate any open space. Just deliver things. So we see a lot of Scrum Master instead of Agile Coach. Agile Coach is becoming like a plague here in Montreal. So
Yeah.
I don't know. So that's the big switch that I saw in the last 2 years. Plus those teams who fire their POs, if the POs is not the business owner for a large scale organization, and they just do it with a GPT, and that's it. Yeah.
So
John, do you know what kind of tendency is in the United States, like in Boston? Do you see the same tendency here?
Yeah, in Minneapolis, yeah, if you look for a Scrum Master on a job board, there might be one if you're lucky.
Mm.
So yeah, I think project manager seems to be what the title is moving to. So I don't know if that means the job is changing or if they just renamed it. But project manager doesn't seem very agile to me.
well, in Microsoft, for example, they don't have a Scrum Master role, but they do have Scrum Masters. But it's all under the title of Program Manager.
Program
Program.
manager.
They call it Technical Program Manager.
Okay.
So when we were Nuance and acquired by Microsoft, when we moved into Microsoft, our titles changed from Scrum Master to Technical Program Manager.
I have also seen Agile Project Manager. I want to make sure I'm saying it right on some of the postings. I don't quite know what that is, but I have noticed that as a title that's popping up on LinkedIn recently.
So
What
this
was that again? Agile Project Manager?
Agile Project Manager, which is oxymoron, right? But this topic kind of ties into what I wanted to bring to the table today, which was what some of the things we talked about in our podcasts. And so I'm going to leverage 4 podcasts specifically from Nigel Dolo, from Martin Hinshelwood, from Dave West, and from Patricia Kong. And I do encourage you all to go to, thank you, man. I do encourage you all to go watch these podcasts because they're just amazing, filled with a lot of good stuff in them. But let me start with what Martin talked about. So Martin said, the state of Agile that we're in right now is because there's been a huge demand over the last couple of decades. And that demand outweighed the competence of the people that could fill that demand. And he highlighted a survey where they asked Scrum Masters with up to 10 years of experience, at least they said they had 10 years of experience, and they categorized them based on their knowledge. So just a basic, and what they came up with was 49% of the Scrum Masters they surveyed had little to no Scrum knowledge. And these are Scrum Masters that said they were Scrum Masters for 12 years or 10 plus years. And 12% of the Scrum Masters had a basic understanding and may have read the Scrum Guide once. So that represents 2/3 of Scrum Masters out there that don't have real life knowledge of not just Scrum, but how to apply Scrum, how to apply it across the organization. And he said, he had someone come to him recently and say, hey, I want to be a Scrum Master. And he said, great, what's your background? Well, my background's in arts. And they think they can take a course and they can become a Scrum Master. And that's hurt us. That's hurt the industry quite a bit because they come in and they can't add value the way that they need to add value for a company to say, hey, I want to keep this person around. So what Martin has suggested was go learn a skill that a software team would actually value. And then go on that team and utilize that skill until the team values you, and then you can build your career from there. So you can't come from some other field, take read a book or take a course and think you can go into a team and be a Scrum Master. So it was really about getting onto the team and adding real value and building that relationship and building that trust before you can go further. I have a couple of hands up. Chun, please.
I think that's a very valid point to when the person said to go to go learn a skill to add value to the team, and also it's quite surprising to hear that a lot of Scrum Masters have not no knowledge of Scrum, and also I've noticed that a lot of what is very applicable to Scrum, what is very transferable would be uh, uh, the scientific method, because it's all based on empiricism, and people I've collaborated with who come from a scientific background, usually even if they were not familiar with Scrum at the beginning, they get it super quickly, and they're very engaged in it. So that's it.
Thank you. Alex.
Yeah, actually, as Chun just mentioned, like for me, when I work in community of practice, let's call it like this, most of the Scrum Master who came like later after the chasm of it's being like popular to do this, like maybe circa 2015, 2016, like when all those project manager transferred to Scrum Master back then. And then after we saw what I call the inflation of certification from our great friend at Scrum Alliance and ICF including and everything. So all of a sudden, anyone who went, as you mentioned a little bit, Joe, the constant were like, oh, we've been 3 days in a hotel with a CST and we are a Scrum Master. The funny thing is I've been introduced to Scrum by engineer that they didn't want a project manager because they say like, Java was new back then, and they say like, it's too complex and we are too big a team. We want you to be a Scrum Master. So and I think like the empiricism is important. And even though like some people like Mike Beadle and Sue will tell you about the architecture of subsumption, I know Danielle, a lot of people say, oh, it's too physics, it's too like everything. But that's the thing. Most of the greatest Scrum Master had the ability to work with and small, medium, and big team were scientific first. They were a dropout of astrophysics, they were a dropout of chemistry, of biology, and they get it. And they are also able to vulgarize this to the business to make it happen. Because we talk about software engineering now a lot too much, I think, in 2023, 2025 almost like. And what about Scrum at scale, enterprise Scrum? like, because if the business is just putting pressure on those who do the work, as Anne mentioned in Boston on our after dinner, I liked it, the Taylorism of Scrum. It's no good for the old grumpy like me who do it because we are forced and imposed. So it's all about this, like we have to voice as a Scrum Master, as a whatever you want to call this, a subject matter of expert of process-driven thing with the guide or without the guide. I work as a Scrum Master for 20 years before the first guide appeared. So how about that? And I became certified only because the market imposed me to have letters next to my name. Because that's about like the practical thing. So as you mentioned, like, and even like last week, June, I don't know if you remember, like we had 2 new guests at our Scrum Beer. It's a Scrum user group that we do in Montreal. One from real estate. Could you imagine, like, she's a real estate making a lot of money and she wants to become a Scrum Master? I was completely that blew my mind, especially in the market, like John said before, Minneapolis, Austin, Texas, Phoenix, Arizona, even here in Montreal. There's about like 44 applicants for one job post. And now we have even more people who wants to become a Scrum Master. I don't get it, especially from real estates and stuff like this. So it's make me laugh a
Yeah.
lot. So
Yeah.
anyways, so
No.
the solution is for us, as Jeff says in his presentation, we have to show that we are valuable. We have to be
and
like
and
we have
and
to
let me
create
offer,
value.
yeah, and let me offer some things that, like what Nigel said, we have to focus on the right thing. So one of the things that Nigel said right off is, if you want to be agile, you first have to become lean.
Yeah.
And he points out that Agile and Scrum, they don't solve problems for your company. They show you where the problems are. And as an organization, starting from executive leadership, there has to be a willingness to solve these problems. And there's a battle that goes on. So we come in as Agile and Scrum practitioners, coaches, whatever, and we're pushing cross functionality, collaboration, working together. Business, and R&D working daily and so forth. But we're coming into companies that are vertically siloed and have been designed and organized that way for decades. So you have very specialized, independent vertical silos: HR, finance, business, sales, R&D, right? They all report up into the CEO, but they all do their own things. And what Nigel has found is that it takes months and months of negotiations just to get these people that are used to doing their own thing to kind of come together and collaborate and talk. So we have to recognize, when we're interviewing for a job, we have to really focus on who's driving this desire for agility and Scrum. How is the company laid out and structured? Is it structured in a way that we're going to be able to actually show the value of Scrum, exercising empiricism and lean thinking, or is this sort of like a grassroots thing by some line manager from director that really doesn't have support from above? We have to, when we're interviewing, we got to find out these answers. We have to ask these questions before we decide to take a job that will lead to a dead end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I share something positive about lately what I saw happening in the last 2 years? Because as an entrepreneur, I consult a lot of startup and also like big 500 companies, and I realized that all those companies who are value based, they already have values, but they're not lip service about their value. They really act. They really use pattern from those values. I could name one that I worked last year. It's IKEA. IKEA is already a value-based company. So they don't have to name anything lean, agile, Scrum, Kanban. They just fracking do it. They just do it, and they always use their 5 values to inform pattern and the way they will provide an experience not only for their client, but for the entire workforce. So you cannot develop an application or implement something or make a migration in the IT world of IKEA without having answer to those 5 values. Is it good for the company? Is it good for the employee? And will it be good for the customer experience? So I lately, all my win-win were in those kind of company with value base already, instead of imposing a model of lean with the Six Sigma green belt, what the
Right.
frack,
And
like, you know.
and
So people are sick and tired of it. They just want value and
that's
value
right.
creation and earn money as soon as possible. The unicorn, and yes, we could transform dinosaur into unicorn. It's take time and negotiation, as you mentioned, and we manage decision to do this.
Right.
That's
And the thing that Nigel really wanted to point out is we need to understand the roots of what we're doing. In other words, if we're saying we're doing Kanban, it's not just about visualizing a workflow. It's about identifying waste. It's about creating a pull system where something downstream pulls work from the something upstream. It's eliminating waste. It's understanding what andon is, which is a signaling, right? It's understanding that where this all comes from, which is the Toyota production system. It's you just can't say, well, we're doing Kanban and I'm visualizing something. Visualizing something is good, but it's not really adding the value. The value is in eliminating the waste and bringing that flow and making it more efficient and making it faster. And that leads me to what Dave West really said. The best Scrum Masters he's seen have the titles of delivery manager. And they come at it with a position of authority. Okay? They're not just there to coach, they're there to teach and to implement. It's about driving the delivery of value. And as Scrum Masters, if we come in, or Agile practitioners, coaches, whatever, we have to look at what is the flow of value currently through the system and how do we improve that? It's not about making sure that our team's writing stories and creating and pointing them. It's about that flow of value and driving it. And when you're talking about value, that goes to what Patricia Kong talked about, which is evidence-based management. Follow that diagram, asking those in the 4 quadrants, asking those serious questions about, how is this valuable, and making sure you can answer those questions. So these are all the things we could do, recognizing, are we in a position where we could create value because the company is structured the right way? And if not, at least we know up front. And then understanding, hey, what authority do I have? What decision rights do I have? Right? If you don't have any, you're probably not going to be able to. Yeah. So I'll bring it up, Lily. I'll send it to you. I'll send a picture. I'll post it here. But that's what I wanted to add to this conversation today, is understanding, we need to be competent. We need to be competent at a very deep level. Understand the theory behind Scrum and agility and Kanban and so forth, so that we can actually execute it at the companies. Okay. We have a question, and then I want to hand it over to Dan. Yes, Alessia.
Actually, it's not a question. I just want to add that in my previous job, I was working like a Scrum Master / delivery manager. And after this job, I was like thinking that probably the way I was working was not correct because there was a lot from delivery management. And now, after you saying this, I understand what kind of value this kind of the / delivery management approach gave me. So just thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, right now I just lean on my previous experience.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I'm glad that resonated with you. Dan, why don't you go next?
Hey, how you doing, everybody? Hope you're doing well. I don't know how many people here are coaches or employees. I wanted to kind of find out how many people here are contractors and are not employees. Some people, right? Alex's character is independent. Okay, everyone else is an employee. Okay, and how many people here are not involved in software agility, but are doing some kind of business type agility, like that is not about engineering? Couple people. All right. So, yeah, I want to talk about this a little bit within the wider umbrella of the use of open space. So we all were at the Give Thanks For Scrum, or most of us were. We had an open space. We had full proceedings. So I don't know how many people. We didn't ask the question. How many people have never experienced this before? And did you ask that question when you were facilitating?
I think we forgot.
Okay, well, wasn't a forget, but it would have been interesting to find out because there's three kinds of people with open space, right? So first of all, here's why you care about open space. It's going to accelerate your organization's development. That's going to set the stage for using lean thinking, using Scrum. Okay. So if your organization is not developing, is not advancing, is not maturing, none of that stuff is on the table, right? You have to have a certain level of maturity first to be able to even consider doing this in a anywhere near, correct or proper fashion, right? So open space is going to increase the maturity of your organization and its development. That's why you care about it. Okay. There's three kinds of open space people: people who have never experienced it, don't really know what it is; people who have experienced it at a conference, right, which is usually sort of a weak implementation; and then people who have experienced open space in an organization. Okay. So, Harrison Owen, who died recently, nice one there, Alex, I like that. Harrison Owen, who died recently, basically said that he doesn't sell open space to anybody. He just waits till they're desperate. Yeah. So when your results are really bad, okay, and you're out of aces, you don't have any more good cards. Okay, now you need to do something completely different, and then you're ready for something like open space, right? So, I want to give you some tips and offer some news about this. Okay, so open space is an invited meeting. Nobody has to go to it. If people have to go to your open space, that is not open space. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, if an authority figure like Joe, for example, invites us all to come to a meeting and we all work for Joe, is there anyone who's not going to that meeting? If Joe's the big boss, he invited us, yeah, we're all going to go. Why? Because we want to be seen by Joe and seen by our manager, right? But then when you go to the meeting, you find out, oh, I really didn't have to go to this. I don't have to impress Joe. I don't have to impress my manager by being here. They actually don't want me here unless I want to be here, right? They learn that when they come because they think they have to, right? So why is this inviting thing good? Because you get all the willing people in the room. That's why. That's why it's good. All right. So I'm going to tell you the secret. The first time you do open space in your organization, everybody's going to show up for the reasons I already explained. But when you do the second one, less people show up. But those people are in because they know they don't have to go and they're there anyways. And the people that don't have to go know that there's no danger from not going. Okay. All right. So what we're doing with open space is we're identifying the people who have passion and responsibility around the topic. All right. So those are your new leaders. Those are the people who are going to drive positive change forward because they're showing up because they want to show up because they're in. Right. Okay. So how are you going to, let's just for the moment, just pretend that everything I say is true. That everything I said up to this point is true. Just pretend, just for now as a thought experiment, just go, okay, I'm going to sit back and I'm going to just pretend everything Dan said is true. Okay. So if you believe those things, then the next question is, how do I get open space in my organization without having to go through a lot of bureaucracy, without having to get permission, without having to be like, get Joe to authorize it, the big boss, right? Here's the best way I know how to do that. You get 4 or 5 teams that are working on related functions or products, and you have a synchronized retrospective, like every 3 months. Their retrospective is a group retrospective where everyone goes into one room for one morning or one afternoon. They go into the biggest room in the company and they do an open space format retrospective. That's the fastest way to bring open space into your organization, because if anyone's asking any questions, you just tell them, oh, we're just doing the retrospective with, the team. We're doing them at a group level every 3 months now. Okay. That's the quickest way to sneak open space in sideways. Okay. Anybody have any questions on that?
No question, but I totally support this, and even like what Eben says in the chat, don't ask permission, just do it like a
Yeah,
corporate
so
rebels,
right.
like a
And if
peer
they
athlete.
ask, what are you doing? You say, we're doing the retrospectives like we always do.
Exactly.
We're just doing a group. We're just doing them all in one room. It's the same exact thing. We're spending the same amount of time. There's no added cost or nothing. And they go, oh, okay. All right. So then if you're going to have a real open space of some kind, you have to have a theme. Like we had a theme. The theme was the future of Scrum with a big question mark at the end. People who found that attractive came to it. So when you do this group retrospective thing, which is really like a small section of the company, open space is what it is, you have to have an overall theme, and the theme should be something around improvement because that's what retrospection is all about, right? It's about inspecting our experience, using that experience for learning, jacking learning into improvement, taking the improvement forward. So some kind of theme around improvement is what you should do. Okay. All right. And then the next thing you should have is you should have proceedings like we did at the conference, right? And Anne was the facilitator of the event, and she planned it, and I helped her. We did the newsroom, and I helped her a little bit there. And I was absolutely impressed by our conference participants completing those proceedings. Everyone just completed, and they were really like if you read them, there was a lot of detail there. So look, when you get all the teams together in one room, they're going to talk about whatever they want to talk about. Okay. Yeah, you have a theme and everything, but they're going to show up and they're going to talk about what's on their mind. Okay, so what's usually on the mind of these people is some of the most important things to be focused on. Right? So the truth is going to see the light of day in your team retrospective with the open space format. Okay. So this is why you need those proceedings, and this is why you need this meeting periodically. So every 3 months you're doing a sort of a rinse and a repeat. Now, when people go to that meeting, the 5 teams, say there's 10 people that are associated with each team, and there's 10 of them or 5 of them, that's 50 people, right? Do you think those 50 people are going to tell stories about what they did on Tuesday? Yeah, they are. They're going to tell stories around the office at lunch and on teams meetings and so forth and so on. That's going to get around. Now, some of the authority figures are going to go, hey, Sean, I understand that you got 5 teams together for a retrospective, and I just continue to hear great stories about what happened there. Where'd you get that idea from, and why didn't you invite me? Okay, next thing you know, now they're open space curious, and now you got great results from it because people had all positive things to say. Why? Because the content was good, because there was a good use of their time, because results were generated from the event, right? That were positive for those teams. Now you're in a position to discuss open space and why it can maybe be good for the organization in a wider application, like the whole company, right? So does anyone have any questions on this approach in this kind of stuff? Remember, I asked you to pretend that everything I said was true before. You can suspend that now if you want and question anything I said. Is there anybody who has a question?
I just posted in chat, Dan, just the importance of the follow-up. So the proceedings are an important artifact to have,
Yeah,
because from that you sort of see the emerging leaders
of
that,
course.
and that want to drive, and really like anything else, a retrospective especially, you want to drive action and you want to drive change, because that's what's going to get people to want to come back and do it again. Would you say that's true?
I would say that's totally true. And if someone who's normally very quiet, let's say her name is Alessia, and say she calls a session and she says, my name's Alessia, my session is, this topic. And everyone starts applauding as she goes to the wall and puts that thing on the wall. And then like half the people are over there at that session. That's pretty much proof that whatever Alessia was talking about, a lot of people cared about. She spoke with a group in some sense. Okay. And all of a sudden she's emerged as a person of interest because she's tapping into something there. Okay. So this is exactly what Joe was just talking about. So what I'm announcing today is that starting next year, after we get through the holiday, on Mondays at noon, anybody who wants to can come to an ongoing open space tutorial where we will have artifacts that will catch you up. You can jump in anytime. You don't have to start from the very beginning. It's not a huge commitment. If you want to learn how to bring open space to your org, if you want to learn about what Ann did to set up our open space, if you want to learn about the proceedings in the newsroom and the theme and authorization and just everything else that goes with it, the roles, the rules, the events, and everything, I will teach that. I have a class that I teach. I'll be using those materials and giving them to you for absolutely free. And there's no obligation for you to come to any other sessions. If you come to one session and you don't like it, you can just leave. But every Monday at 12 o'clock for an hour, I'll be teaching on how to bring open space to organizations and teaching the form and the content of open space. Okay. And we'll be announcing that as we, get through the rest of the year here, and probably mid-January we'll start doing that. And once in a while, if I have to do something on Monday, I might skip a Monday or whatever. But it's an open invitation to come in and learn about open space. So you'll get a checklist for the facilitator, for how to set up a checklist for how to set up the space, a checklist on how to prepare, the leader of the organization, and the whole thing will be sort of within the context of being able to do this on your own without help from me or Ann or anybody else. You'll know how to do it, and you'll have supporting docs and checklists that will enable you to pull this off. Okay. It's not hard. It's simple. It's a turbocharge for the teams that you pull together in this way. And I hope that you'll come and see about this. And Alessia, I'm sorry I used your name in vain. I just wanted to use your name as an example there, just as someone who's quiet. And that's it. That's all I've got for you now. I hope you'll take me up on this Monday offer. And if anyone has questions, now it's a good time to ask, because I have to actually drop to go do another.
Yeah, we have two hands up, and then I want to hand it over to Pooja to bring us home. So Alessia and then Alex. Try to make it fast.
Yeah,
please.
so the first question is going to be online.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and then second question, where we can get the information about it. It's going to be posted on LinkedIn group.
The second question first. We'll just send out an email to the whole group. They're now on the list, so you'll get it. And then online, I have found that Microsoft Teams is really fantastic for open space. And the cheap way to do it is to set up one Teams meeting for each session. So each session is a Teams meeting, and then the grid is a document like the Word doc or a Google doc, and they just click the link and boom, they're in the session. So each session is like a room, right? And then you have a sort of another session that's the opening and closing link. So you have the opening link and the closing link at the end of the agenda. So that's how I do it. And one of the advantages is the teams will actually write the proceedings for you because it records everything and it's transcribed.
Co-pilot, right?
Yeah, it's just amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So that's the short answer, but I'll be teaching the details of that as well. Okay. All right.
All right. Thank you. Alex.
Really quick, Danielle, an open space, when you mentioned about the quality of the story or the invitation to a session or the quantity, because I had a stakeholder once, he says like, we do it every 3 months and nobody come necessarily to my thing. Is it like my subject or my audience? But he thought it was important to discuss this, but they always have like a few people. So what do you say to that? Pretty quickly.
Yeah. Let me tell you a story about this. One of our sessions, it was called in our open space at the Give Thanks, was not attended by anybody either, right? Here's what happened. I'm going to tell you a story. One time at one conference, I put up a session in the first time slot and nobody came to it. Okay. And my friends were all teasing me about it. They're like, oh, look, nobody came to your session. How's it make you feel? They were like, they were like giving me shit about it, right? And I was kind of indignant about this. What was really going on was Bob Galen also had a session at the same time, and it was local to his. This thing was local to his group, to his where he lives. So everyone and their mother and their cousins were all at Bob's session. All right, but there was a blank spot in the third time slot. Okay, so I took my session off the first time slot. In the middle of the first time slot, I pulled it off the first one, and I stuck it in the third one. And the spot that I picked was sort of a public space where people were walking by. Okay. Well, guess what? In the third session, Bob didn't have a session. I did. Okay, now everyone's over at my session. Not everyone, like half the people. And as people were walking by, I'm like, hey, you should really sit down. This session's really good. You know, it'd be really wrong for you to leave. You should sit down. I got everybody to come to my session. Okay, so just because people don't come to your session, it could be because there's something else going on that's really popular. And I use it as a sort of it's a trick. You take the session off the first, you take your session off of the first time slot, and you stick it lower in the schedule where there's an open space, and then everybody shows up. Okay, so that's my answer, Alex. Okay, but speaking, if you call a session and nobody comes, that's called data.
Right. That happened in this past open space. I think you've all called a session and only one person put up. So it happens.
I also noticed as people were putting their sessions up, the first time slot, there were 3 really good topics, and people who had other ones grabbed theirs and went, no, I want to be at that one. I want to be there. So they picked a different time.
Yeah.
And I have to drop. I have to make room for
Thank you, Dan.
as well. So I have to bail
Take care, Dan,
and we'll be sending more information about the open space workshops that Dan's doing. So I want to hand it off to Pooja. And Pooja, I'd like you to bring us home on what we should take away from this past 2024. It's been amazing so far, and I know you're going to add more to it.
Right. So thank you, Joe. Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Dan, for your great summary so far. So I've been kind of quiet, just listening to everything that everybody's been saying. So a lot of what I'm going to say is like repeat of what we've talked about, but I just want to highlight the different themes that we hit on this year and do a brief summary just so you guys can get a flavor for what we've done and kind of like what you can anticipate in 2025 just based on the topics that you've heard so far. So I know in 2023, when we ended our Give Thanks for Scrum, our main focus was on empiricism. So we continued that into the new year where we really did focus on Scrum Master roles with empiricism and how to make those changes at the organization as well. So some big takeaways that we understood from that was just making sure that we actually were not forcing Scrum on those teams that didn't really require it, right? So us to kind of take a look back and say, does this really require it? And then also just making sure that we're the places where the keyword of value, as we spoke about before, is really driving home, whether it may be found in places such as a product goal, right? If we're achieving the actual delivery and incremental value and just showing leadership that what we're doing is actually something that they want to continue to do, right? And sometimes it might take a different direction, but to Anne's point about how we can communicate and make sure that everybody's seeing like, this is the work that we're putting in, this is the output that we're getting. And if the two don't add up, it doesn't mean that you're not doing your job. It's just that they might have a different approach of how they're going to do it. Joe specifically talked about how at his company, they don't really have the title of Scrum Master. So I know we had one person who was asking, okay, like what other things can I search? So people have rebranded what it is and they've gone back to other ways. It doesn't mean that the Scrum Master role doesn't exist. It's just people are taking on the different flavors and figuring out how they can make this role, quote unquote, right, as we describe it, or maybe the responsibilities that they're doing relevant and continuing on as we go on. So hopefully that makes sense and it resonates very well with how we can do it. And then really taking a look at team structure, right? So again, we heard Alec, Jolie talk about how in Montreal, they're totally getting rid of this idea of product owners if they don't have a business value, a business owner stake, in the ground, because they may not be providing that quote unquote value that we keep going back to, right? So I think it's just really nice to summarize and see that, with that empiricism of this whole idea of lean, it's a lot about reevaluation as well. And for us to be able to reevaluate and see and think, and then for the same thing for us as we're going forward in our roles, is that idea of what we're producing or what we're giving out to the company still, making sense as we go forward into the next year? We also did talk a little bit about how we can improve our engagement with stakeholders. And again, the primary message through that, again, was delivery, looking at team structure, looking at the role itself, right? We have these maybe quote unquote book definitions that we were handed, or maybe what leadership thinks that we have. And sometimes being able to challenge that and change that as we go forward is super helpful as we continue to move forward. But then also kind of taking a look back and saying, okay, well, when we did do this, how did we impact, or how did we deliver? How did we appease to our quote unquote stakeholders, or somebody who was at, different levels within the company, right? I like that question. And then kind of just going into the next pieces of empirical strategies for agile release planning. So just making sure that, as we're continuing to plan out, and I think right now is a perfect time to think about planning, right? Some people have already gotten into their planning for 2025. Some people are just entering that, making sure that you're able to talk about some things, right? We maybe have focused on predictive outcomes, burn down charts, and also progressive adjustments. And now we need to look back at other things to make sure that we're going from there. So that was kind of the first half of the year where we focused a lot on that. Then we kind of switched over to measurable things that, because we saw this shift, which led us to our Give Thanks for Scrum around the future of Scrum and what it really is. So, hey, let's focus on things that we have on OKRs, right? What value is it? How do we really prepare ourselves for that concept? For those of you who didn't hear about it, understanding what an OKR actually is, and then moving forward with it. So if you need some highlights, we can definitely link those in the chat as well, so you guys can take a look at that. And then also after that, we really talked about, this idea of bad mouthing agile in the world, right? We maybe potentially had this idea that is agile dead based on, what people are saying. They're no longer finding it relevant. They're going back to traditional methods. So that all kind of summarized into talking about how we can continue to deliver value and maybe our role or whatever else it might be. But then to everybody, we referenced Patricia Kong, Ryan Ripley, and Todd about how they talked about unlocking business agility with evidence-based management, right? So going back to that empiricism theme that we started off with and really bringing it home to say, hey, these are the different ways that you can do it, and making sure that by looking at measurable values where people can look at what has been done and being able to take that forward, I think was really great to see, and how it really captured. I know for me personally, I don't think our team had ever done that. So when I brought that forward, it was great to say, hey, you know what, this was something we didn't look at. And now that we've seen it, we have a better idea of how to actually curb the way we're doing things today and how we're going to continue to do them going forward. And then one of the big topics that I'm not going to get as much time to, just because I do want to leave a few minutes at the end for any comments or thoughts, is just this whole topic about AI, how we're really, whether it's going to work or not. Company specifically about the positivity and how we can incorporate AI. And I have somebody who's talking about how they tried to incorporate AI and it didn't work out. So I think it's really going to be cool. But as you can see, we've had a variety of topics and we're really good about keeping relevance. Joe has done a great job with the podcast. I'm just going to put a little plug in for that, and just making sure that, that we are constantly keeping on the edge of our seats about Agile, and making sure that you guys can communicate, talk to us, figure out where you have your, interest points. And then also, taking a concept like open space and bringing it to your company and seeing what it can do for you. So I know that was really quick, but I wanted to make sure I left a little bit of time. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Well done. Any questions or anything anyone want to comment about what Pooja brought up? Alex loves it. Thank you. Yeah, and I think what Pooja talked about, relevancy, is the most important thing. We've never been a group that is a Agile 101 group. We've always sort of been downstream from that, and looking at the current organizations, looking at the market, and trying to stay ahead of the game. And there's, as we started this year, was going back to the roots, going back to basics, empiricism in the modern world, which was last year's Give Thanks for Scrum. But as the year evolved, as we saw what happened at Capital One, as we saw what happened at Fidelity and other institutions where Scrum Masters were being laid off in large numbers, and we started seeing the posts that were being put up on LinkedIn. For one, we started seeing that there was a lot of angst and anxiety, and so we pivoted and we tried to reach out to some of the really strong minds that are out there, people like Jeff Sutherland and Dave and Nigel and Ryan Ripley and those folks. We have a lot of good connections. We went out to all of them and said, hey, what's going on in the Agile industry? What do you see happening? And so I think as we head into 2025, I hope that in this last hour, we've summarized some things that you can start doing as you head into 2025, really evaluating yourself. Am I adding value to my team? Am I adding value to my organization? Am I adding value to the company? And do people know that? All right. Am I working from product goals? Do we have objectives and key results? Do we have good collaboration, or do we have vertical silos? Right. So these are all the things you want to start asking. Do I focus on delivery of value? Do I even know what value is? How do I measure that? Right. These are the things that are going to help us as we move into 2025. And so Give Thanks for Scrum is always sort of our catapult into the next year. And so the topics that we're going to be going into next year are going to be from this past Give Thanks for Scrum. But as we see things changing, we're going to evolve and stay on the forefront of that. So I want to thank you all for 2024. And I want to thank my great Agile Boston colleagues, Pooja and Dan. I want to thank, I get these great stories from people who came from Give Thanks for Scrum. Alessia came from Rochester. She pinged me the day before and said, can I get a ticket? I'm going to get a flight. If you tell me, Joe, I can get a ticket, I'm going to catch a flight tonight, and I'm going to be there tomorrow for your event. And then I'm going to catch a flight back. I mean, that really is like, wow. When we think about what Alessia did, but that's what we're doing. We're touching people. We're helping people to succeed. Jeff Sutherland spent a long time in Give Thanks about investing. Why was he talking about investing? Because I feel like he looks at us as his children. He invented this Scrum and Agile thing that we've all been, benefiting from, right? And trying to teach others to do. And a lot of us have jobs and livelihoods because of what Jeff and Ken did and those other signatories did. So I think he looks at the whole situation and says, let me help. Let me help my kids, succeed as the world's changing. And he talked a lot about AI, for example, and how we shouldn't be afraid of AI. But AI is creating a big disruption in the market. And who is better to handle disruption and teach others how to handle disruption than Agilists, than Scrum people, because that's what we do, right?
Exactly.
So
it's like, if I may say, because I crossed the border actually 2 times in the last 10 years to go there, because I prefer the Boston Bruins and Agile Boston to Montreal Canadian and Agile Montreal, because you bring guys value. And I was so pleased to bring Chun with me as celebrating her first year as a Scrum Master, because as a whole grumpy, wolf, I passed the baton to a next generation. This is the next generation that will make it like the new leader we talked about earlier. So, and I would like to thank you, Anne, Pooja, and of course Danielle. But Danielle, I'm a friend since Mike Beadle, anyways. So I really, really appreciate you. Boston is the place to go for involving with agility, business agility, and all of these contexts. So thank you so much, and you can count on me next year.
So, with that, I'm gonna say farewell for 2024. Looking forward to 2025. Wishing you all a safe and merry and happy holidays. If you celebrate Christmas, have Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, or any other holiday you celebrate, and of course, Happy New Year. And we will see you the 4th week in January, the 4th Wednesday in January for our first virtual event. And also in January, as Dan said, we're going to be starting off the open space tutorials, which he's going to be doing. So we're going to have a lot of good content next year, and we're looking forward to seeing you all then. So until then.
Until next time.
Peace.
Be well.
Bye, everybody.
Cheers.
Bye.